back to another episode of Detonation. Detonation, where we're putting death out of business. We're in front of the White House because we're running to the White House with the USTP. We're going to make a splash in this electoral cycle. We're going to make a splash. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. But along the way, we're going to meet lots of interesting people, lots of really cool, interesting people. And Mr. Kerecz, I thank you very much for this because you've organized another great guest to come on the show and help us do some interesting discussions while we plod along to unlocking the White House. It's David Craig. David Craig, lovely to have you here on Detonation, mainstreaming transhumanism. You're with the Planetary Society. Can you please give us a little bit of information about what your job is all about? Thank you very much, David Craig.
Thank you. So really the Planetary Society, if a lot of you space fans know, was founded by Carl Sagan almost 40 years ago, back in like the early 1980s. But really the goal is to be an advocate for empowering citizens, space fans to really, I guess you could say I guess the main goal is to help fund, or at least be an advocate for NASA's budget, as well as the private sector as well. My real role right now is probably, I'm an outreach coordinator along with two other gentlemen here in Philadelphia, or at least the Philadelphia area, in this suburban area. Our real goal is to kind of bring the community together to at least have conversations about space. I would say maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, depending on what's going on. We have a lot of support between some of the major universities like Penn, Drexel, Villanova, and Westchester, along with a lot of other private companies like we have Lockheed Martin, Boeing, kind of in the surrounding area. So we're fortunate to have some industry leaders come in and speak to our group. We typically try to bring in about 30 to 50 people per event. And we always try to like go out for like drinks afterwards, or like a lunch or a dinner and so on. So my real role right now is trying to bring people together, as well as trying to promote space as much as I can, whether through social media or just in the Philly community.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And Kerecz, you're here. How are you? And how are you doing? What are you up to post-election? What are you falling in line with? How's your job? How's everything?
Well, I had written up a proposal for Mr. Benzion about what his campaign would be about space for him. I'm still kind of working on with his campaign about the space side. So that's why I'm trying to get you some interesting people to talk about space and involvement. I worked with Dave over the past 2 years, both times with Explore Mars organization down in DC with their summit, which is a very interesting organization, and might be able to get you somebody on from here to talk about more in detail on what they're doing, pushing and helping to push towards going to Mars 2033, which is supposed to be the orbit when everything's the closest. So that's a fun organization. I've worked with Dave, and I will actually be one of Dave's speakers. We were joking earlier about the shyster he has coming in on December 7th to speak. But actually, that shyster will be me. I'll be speaking about my edge of space flight from Russia. So I'm one of the speakers, though. But I'm sure, hopefully, Dave can tell us tonight about some of the more interesting speakers they've had, and say maybe some of the interesting ideas that might have come across from some of the speakers. So that's one of the things I hope that Dave might be able to touch base with. But the organizations are very, very interesting. I like dealing with Explore Mars and being a member of the Planetary Society. And there's a lot of interesting things they do. Actually, at work, speaking about my day job at work, I have one of these little asteroids from the Planetary Society, stress-relieving asteroid. I don't know if you ever saw one of those, Dave, that they have. So you can get that from the Planetary Society. Yeah. So it's a great organization trying to do a lot of stuff. And like Dave said, it was founded by Carl Sagan. It's kind of funny because I'm old enough to remember when he founded that. So he says there 40 years, but it shows you how long people have been working towards us getting to space, and hopefully finally it's really going to happen. Although, like I've said before, I'm disappointed we're mostly pushing it. It looks like the military is what's going to get us there to stay there, but as long as we're going to get there, I think it'll branch out after we get there. There's going to be contractors. A lot of the companies like that Dave mentioned, although they have military contracts, they have a lot of civilian employees that go along with the military. And I think you're going to find when the military puts things in space with the Space Force, there's probably going to be a lot of contractors that are actually civilians that end up in space because of it. So that's a good thing, I think. But
Yeah, it's this icebreaker notion. It's like when I think about space travel in the context of who's going to fill that gap. I mean, I just correlate it to what happened with naval history, because essentially it's a new form of navy. You know, space is kind of like a vast ocean of darkness, and you know, and there's been different exploratory times when, you know, when explorers went out there, you know, private explorers, Vikings or coordinated tribes, or they went out and explored for trade to try and find different routes. For example, Christopher Columbus was trying to go to India quicker. You know, that was sort of a trade issue. You know, there's been different motives for different exploratory measures and carving of new pathways. Not just in the naval history, but also in land-based history. But naval history is what I'd like to focus on as a sort of a historical idea to replicate into space. And, you know, if the military is carving a path, I mean, the military isn't always been carving a path. I mean, NASA, you know, it was a civilian organization, was doing for civilian purposes, and they got to the moon first, so I guess they initially carved the path. But if the military's coming in now because of Earth issues, I mean they're late to the party in that context. I mean, they're very late to the party. But if it's the next step, I mean, it's the next step. But in naval history, the same thing has happened over and over again, and they just generate new demands, like you say, which are kind of like these because things need maintenance. I mean, once you get you know, technology up into space, people, plants, animals, anything like that that needs maintenance, well, then you create a demand side for that civilian component. So, you know, I don't. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting in that way, which is why you see a lot of space contractors, you know, with these satellites and stuff. I mean, there's too many satellites in space. But anyway, look, I just wanted to go before we got deep into space talk. I just wanted to ask David Craig. So what's the origin story of you personally? I mean, are you a big sci-fi fan? Did you go down to Florida and you know, watch the rocket launch? I mean, what got you into space? What got you into space and space topics? You're a math genius. I mean, why are you interested in space? What's your personal origin story?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a very big, I guess, sci-fi nerd. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. I read a lot of sci-fi. I try to keep up with shows. Obviously, not all of them are good nowadays when it comes to sci-fi, but I try to keep up with what I can. No, I'm actually I'm in finance. I'm a financial planner for full time. I've been doing it for 3 years now. 3 years out of school. I don't know. I think a lot of it was kind of reading Cosmos originally, probably early high school, and then the reboot came on back in 2013, 2014. And then kind of from there, that's really where I got really serious about it. I read a lot of stuff from like Carl Sagan's, one of his wives, Andrean, and then kind of from there, I just kept following along with what's going on with private companies as well as nonprofits, and obviously just stuff like with Blue Origin, and SpaceX, and what's going on with like who's getting to the moon first, who's getting to Mars first. So kind of a good mix of everything. Nothing really prompted my interest like all at once. It was kind of just a gradual thing. Now that I have the opportunity to kind of give back, that's kind of where the Planetary Society came in, and more recently Explore Mars. So it's kind of just like a progressive thing that I just got more and more excited about, passionate about. So
That's really, really awesome. And I too kind of have an origin story somewhere along the lines of science fiction. I mean, I read a lot of science fiction. My mum put a bunch of glow-in-the-dark on my roof, like these glow-in-the-dark stickers. And so every night I would just go there and I would say Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And when Pluto was a planet back then, but
Pluto's a forgotten planet.
Yeah. So I just learned those over and over, and then I would think about each one, and no, it's really fun, planets are amazing because they're so small in the context of how much dark space there is. I mean, really, they stand out like a jewel in a solar system, but really, there's a lot of dark space out there, and I think that's an overwhelming feature that's often forgotten is all of the almost infinite space that's in the universe. So well, you obviously know about Mr. Keretz's MiG adventure, yeah?
Yeah. We've been talking for over a year now about our shared passions and everything. So,
have you ever thought about doing anything similar?
As far as what exactly?
Going to space. Are you going to go up into space?
That would be cool. I got to save up a little bit more money, but I think maybe one day, maybe the next 5 years, I would like to. Kind of just depends on when the timing is right.
You just got to apply. You got to apply to be one of Boeing's financial people that go up to the moon with the military people. See, so they're going to need people to work with money and finances and keep track of the bills and stuff. So
I'm kind of just waiting to see if one of these like Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic or Jeff Bezos' Blue Origins actually takes off and actually has affordable launches to at least low Earth orbit with the next call it 3 to 5 years, which would be really cool. But it'd just be financially hard for them to do that. But I think either way, I would try it as soon as I can.
Yeah, it's good fun. And speaking of that, what do you think? The Planetary Society. So, what do you think the prospects of Moon or Mars colonization in the next 50 years looks like? Are we on trajectory to do it? Is it a fantasy? What do you see there in that context?
I would personally say the moon is very, very feasible. I think Mars colonization is a little overhyped just because there's so many unknowns as far as how long a human can live on the surface and everything, and if something were to go wrong, what would happen in that situation. But I think the moon, because it's 100 times closer, literally, I think the chances of actually having someone live there full time is very, very feasible. Especially with the new technology coming out. But I think as far as Mars goes, I think it's going to be more than 50 years until there's actually an effort to have someone live there from birth till death. Just because just so many unknown factors right now. But I think right now that the moon is a very close target for someone actually living there for many, many decades without too many health effects or too many downsides in general.
Are you friends, either of you, with Dr. Robert Zubrin, who wrote The Case for Mars?
I've never personally met him, but I've read his books before, at least a couple of them. I know he's the wizard when it comes to Mars. I mean, he's been involved for 40 years now. I don't know, John, have you met him before?
No, I haven't. Who is the gentleman that was at Explore Mars with us that did work on the Mars TV show and book and also did that Moon book? What was his name? I forget his name. He was a speaker at the luncheon that day. I can't remember who that is.
Oh, that's the guy with National Geographic.
Right.
John. It was John or David. I'm trying to. Or it was I can't remember. There's 2 shows about his book now. It's called Mars by National Geographic, and he wrote the books that preceded those. But Robert Zubrin. He's probably in his 50s, 60s. He's just been a lifelong advocate for it, and he just has many books now. So I don't know if you ever met him before.
Well, because I used to talk to you.
No, I haven't met him.
I used to talk to Robert Zimmerman on Facebook, and then Elon Musk swooped in and he gave Elon Musk a Mars Society award, and then he stopped talking to me on Facebook because I think he got a whole bunch of cash. So I was wondering if I could reconnect with him, because I'm pretty sure he was on track to coming on the show for a second there. And then and then he disappeared on me, which is understandable. I mean it's totally understandable. But if I could reconnect with that guy, because he, the Mars Society is pretty optimistic. I mean, not optimistic in terms of that, but they push obviously for Mars colonization, and that like you said, they do have that 2033 as a sort of outer limit for the first sort of phase, because the Mars years, the amount of time it takes for Mars to go around the sun is a long time as compared to Earth time, right?
Yeah, I mean, Earth and Mars link up about every 26 months. So every 26 months, they're only about, call it, I think, 25 million miles, which is actually very, very close compared to when they're on the polar opposite sides of the sun. But yeah, like you said, I mean, the orbit is just much longer in general. I'm not sure the exact numbers. I just follow more when the Earth and Mars are close together. I know that's when launches are taking place and so on.
Yeah, that 2033, I think they said because of the positioning of Mars over the 2-year time period, it's the best time for people to be able to fly to Mars, stay there a year and fly back, and that's just when the orbits align. And I guess that time will come again. It's just that's the next time when they're in line like that. And something I was thinking when you said about the moon is, I think the moon is a good testing phase for technologies that are going to need to live on Mars. Because they can test things, and if they're on the moon first, they can test things. And if it does go wrong, you're a lot closer to Earth if something goes wrong than you are when you're on Mars. So there's a lot of technologies that can be tested and then utilized in Mars. But if they are actually on the moon by 2024, like they say they are, 2033 might not be as far away and impossible as you think it is. If they have that number of years to test technologies and stuff, it might not be that far. I mean, it's probably pushing it, but it's still not bad. It might be a good window.
Yeah, but they even talk about too. I remember there was one. I think it was like a Joe Cassidy at Exploring Mars conference. He was talking about just like with Apollo. I think Apollo 8, 9, 10 maybe. They all went to the moon, but they never actually landed. So there's actually talks of the first couple ventures towards Mars would just be like a very in-depth kind of like they'd be treating themselves like the ISS spaceship and just go around there for a couple of years and then come back, but not actually experience being the first couple of people there. So there's talks of that, but I think the idea of what we were talking about earlier as far as colonization, I think that it's a little overblown just because there's so many unknowns right now, but I really hope the 2033 land for a year happens and then come back. I think that can be doable. It just kind of depends on how things are going with once people try to get back to the moon in about 4 or 5 years from now. If technology can keep advancing enough in the next 10 years after that, then I think that 2033 goal is very feasible. It kind of just depends on what they find.
Yeah, it's really interesting, this whole Mars thing. It's especially because Elon Musk popularizes it so hard through SpaceX that that he wants to get to Mars. That his initial, I remember his initial stunt, so to speak, was just to basically buy a big rocket, put a greenhouse in there, and just shoot it off to Mars as a publicity stunt, burn through all his cash, and he couldn't do it. He was like, I can't even burn through all my money, and so then he found disruptive space technology, which was disrupt the whole industry and make the industry commercial for cheaper, quicker, faster space launches. Right?
Are you there?
Yeah, we're losing you a little bit here.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you there? Hello?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Hello.
Yeah, so Elon Musk basically disrupted the whole rocket industry because he couldn't burn through his cash like he wanted to in order to just do a media stunt. So if that sort of stuff happens sort of on the off chance, and you can get a whole Mars industry funded from some rich guy who was trying to push forward one agenda. I mean, there are other industries out there, such as space tourism, such as the space elevator, such as the asteroid mining, because that are ripe for disruption. I think because like such as like the space elevator, I mean, we think of it as something that can't be disrupted because it's not really invented yet, but it's like you could still think of a whole new way of doing it. I mean, it's like there's more than one way to skin a cat, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's going to be really interesting. So I guess my next question was going to be, if we are living in space, Craig, do you think we go to the moon hypothetically, right? What are we going to be doing if we go to the moon? I mean, is the moon all about helium-3, or is there other things that is going on there? Is it science? Is it exploration? Is it what's going on there? Or is it just going to be about helium-3?
That's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of it is going to be, like as John was talking about, it's kind of like a landing platform for learning what we can do there, and then trying to extrapolate that out towards Mars and maybe asteroids and so on. But yeah, I think, like you said, helium-3 is probably one of the main things, along with just trying to learn how to do things up there that they could potentially save some trips from Earth, essentially. So if you could one day go from the moon to Mars and then back without too much harm, I think that would be a big saver when it comes to cost, because you got to think about every time a rocket goes from sea level on Earth to even low Earth orbit, that's the same amount of fuel as going from like low Earth orbit to like Pluto. So if they could somehow do enough tests and everything to go from the moon to somewhere else in the solar system, I think that'd be pretty groundbreaking as well. But other than that, helium-3, and then learning how to, like, I guess, mine asteroids and look for some precious metals to use potentially rocket fuel. I don't really know what else is really out there right now, other than just what people are speculating on.
Yeah, I think of it as that platform thing also, because I know when I did my Meg flight, if you wanted to be up in the Meg and just do aerobatics, it was a lot cheaper than going to the edge of space because of the cost of fuel to go the extra elevation in the atmosphere. So therefore, if you're taking lots of trips from the moon to other places, you're not always fighting the main atmosphere, the main gravitational pull. So that's kind of makes it cheaper also. That's kind of nice.
So the moon becomes a sort of storage center, a staging ground for great exploration, because I think that the moon's atmosphere, well, this moon's gravity is fairly low, right? And there's a very thin atmosphere, right? So
it's like like 15% of Earth. So.
Yeah, that's essentially nothing. So it's very easy to just fill up fill up and then launch off to either a satellite, or satellite station, or some space tourist venture, or off to Mars, or Pluto, or Venus, or wherever you're going. So it's really tethering and fixing that link between Earth and Mars is really the prison planet complex, right? That we have to fix this atmosphere problem that Mr. Kerecz is talking about, that you felt when you went up there. That the
G-force and stuff, yeah. As long as, but then again, we were talking with Ben Zion about the elevator concept. So that too, if people are taken up in the one of those elevators to a platform in orbit in space, then they could more easily that would be a nicer progression than going up against the G's, and then they can easily be taken from there to the moon and from there further. But that something like the elevator, or even they could go back to using air balloons, which can take people to high elevations more passively, and you don't have to fight the G's as much. That could be used to take supplies and people to a higher elevation. That from there they could go further. That would be other ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, there must be more ways, because like when you look back through history, in hindsight, when you look at technology, you go, oh yeah, why didn't we think of that? Why didn't we think of the wheelbarrow?
Yeah.
Like we're shifting the stuff with our hands and dragging it using the and then bam, like the wheelbarrow. How simple is that? So there must be more ways. I'm trying to think of them, but I shouldn't do that right now. But there's there must be more ways that are so obvious that they said, why instead of looking up, why didn't we dig down into the earth, or it's something stupid like that. It's like well, the interesting is though the we know the physics, we know that gravity pulls towards the center, and we know if we know the basic physics, then we know sort of the forces that we're fighting. But it is interesting that it is kind of that notion of that Earth, the gravity trap, the atmosphere trap, and then once you're out of there, it's all pretty easy, because like the one of the main reasons these Mars advocates go on and on about Mars isn't because they want to settle Mars so bad. It's because it's a great staging platform for the asteroids, and once you're into the asteroids, it's all over, Red Rover. Humanity is pretty much unstoppable at that point. And that's why Robert Zubrin and all that advocate so heavily for Mars, because Mars becomes a second Earth essentially. It's you've got water and stuff, but you're not, as a species, you're still not 100% safe. I mean, you could have you could have one piece of technology that spans the two planets, and they you can still destruct. But once you're into the asteroids, you're talking about trillions of people with all different societies, all different systems potentially, and you wouldn't, like, there would be no sort of definitive factor that holds them all together. And the species would be basically unstoppable at that point. And I think that's what these Mars advocates are really hoping for. It's that the great scattering of humanity, based from Mars, and that's why they don't really concentrate on the moon. They want to skip the moon. There's not enough to learn, or not enough. There's not enough incentive to go to the moon. What do you say to that?
Yeah. I mean, it's really just being able to be not dependent on Earth. So once you can get out there, it's just being able to somehow harvest water, make food, make rocket fuel would be probably the main three. And then once you can really figure out that, along with obviously just allowing humans to live in space for many, many years at a time, because obviously no one's lived in space more than a year now. Other than guy John Kelly. So I think if you can figure out like really those four things, the food, water, rocket fuel, and just being able to have humans live there for a decade or more, and being just not dependent on Earth, I think that's really what a lot of Mars advocates are looking for. Is really, like you said, the human race would be unstoppable if we could actually get to that point. Because if we keep having to go back to Earth for every time, then it's just like kind of, we're not really going anywhere, kind of going back in circles. So if you can figure out a way to branch off, that would be really the game changer.
Maybe we should look at the moons and the asteroids as in the truck stops of outer space, places that enable us to go to the planets and stuff, and supply and do things we need. I did look up the guy we had seen. That was Leonard David, was his name.
That's
he was
right.
the author of Moon Rush, which is about the new space race. Pretty good book. I do have that from him. Let's see, the other book that he was on, trying to find out. He wrote a book along with Buzz Aldrin, which was called Mission to Mars, A Vision for Space Exploration. He had written that. And that was one of the books that went into helping with the National Geographic show.
Gotcha.
Buzz Aldrin is also another a person that had been to a couple of the Explore Mars events, Explore Mars summits, and I did get to meet him 2 years ago. Did you get to meet him also 2 years ago?
Is there? That was last.
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah.
2018, I think that was.
Yep.
I enjoyed talking to him very much. Seemed to be a very nice man.
Oh yeah, same here.
A bit of history you get to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think that, I think that I like the point that you brought up, Dave, before about testing things on the moon, because there's technology they can test there for habitats and people living that I would feel safer of them using for the first time on the moon before you send somebody all the way out to Mars to test it. So it would be nice that if they already start testing that in 2024, even if, 4 people to use in 2033, that would be great, I think. And a good, what would you want to call it, step or stepping stone. Like I said, maybe the moons will become the truck stops, because they believe in that. They're expecting to also try and put some colonization or some structures on the moons of Mars also. So they would then probably be like the same kind of staging areas to go back and forth to the surface of Mars, just like our moon will be for us to be the surface of Earth.
Yeah, I mean, if they could establish something on Phobos and Deimos, I mean, that would be big, just because probably going to and from there would be relatively easy compared to going all the way back and forth from Mars. So, like you said, those truck stops would be a good way to say it.
So the moon will become Way Station 1. That's a new name of the moon. Well done, Mr. Kerecz. You've renamed the moon. It is fascinating. The planets are fascinating. They all hold different minerals and materials and have different characteristics. I mean, Jupiter is very different from Mars, which is very different from Mercury, which is very different from Venus. Yeah, they're all very different. They're all in different regions of the solar system, and essentially, they're all encased by I just forgot the name of that thing that encases all of us. But with all the rocks around it.
Gravity?
The what?
Gravity?
Asteroid belt?
No, I was thinking of the way out there with all the little rocks that are all around the solar system.
Kuiper belt?
Yeah, the Kuiper belt, right? Yeah, I had that in my head, and then but anyway, yeah, the Kuiper belt, right? It's kind of like once you get out and you fill up. I mean, what do we do? What do we do against the Kuiper belt? I guess that's my next question. Hypothetically, all right, we've colonized all these exoplanets and these planets in this solar system where we live all over the asteroids. I mean, what do you do vs the Kuiper belt?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously all these theories right now about interstellar space travel, but I mean, I don't have anything definite to say about that. I mean, there's talks about using antimatter, but I just don't know how that would be feasible, at least in the next couple of decades. I mean, John, do you have anything on that?
Not really. The only thing I think back on is, they've talked about wind sails and ships that fly that go that way, because you're in space and there isn't much, so you don't really need much to push you. The other idea that for a long time they've talked about putting people in some form of suspended type animation where they just actually basically slow your system down, which is like I've said before, for the transhumanistic-party, talking about extending life. I think those are technologies that we might develop for inner space travel that might have benefits for us and the human race in the long run here on Earth. So that's another possibility, but I have the feeling that by the time we get to it, we're probably going to have technology that will enable us to travel faster and do things differently than we actually imagine right now. I think there's going to be some things we're not thinking of right now that will come into possibilities.
And now that you bring that up, if you remember back in like maybe 5 years ago, when Stephen Hawking was alive, there was this Russian billionaire named Yuri. I can't remember his last name right now. They put a couple billion towards this project called Starshot Breakthrough or something. I can Google it, but it's essentially just trying to find a way to send mini cameras to the next closest star, Alpha Centauri A and B. It essentially they could travel about 20% of the speed of light, so they could theoretically get there in about 20 years. And they're assuming the technology for that would come out in 30 to 40 years. And essentially be really pushed by lasers. As hard as that, however that would even work. I know there was
same thing like the sail type idea. You don't need things the same in space to push objects because there isn't the resistance.
Yeah.
So light itself actually could push an object.
Yeah, and they would send out thousands of these. They'd be maybe like 1 centimeter in diameter, and then a lot of them wouldn't make it, but the ones that do would be the first ones to take pictures and everything, which is really cool. So
take pictures and send them back.
Yeah.
But
I do remember seeing that when Hawking was up on the stage there, and he got that. I do remember hearing about that. That's really cool. Alpha Centauri is a long way away, but this is my point, because the universe is, as you both know, I mean, it's really big. And the reason I bring up the Kuiper Belt is because even once we can talk about Earth, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, Venus, we can talk about all these things, but I mean, the point is there's a whole universe out there to colonize. It goes on and on and on and on, and it's one little solar system is kind of only the beginning of a galaxy, which is only the one galaxy in a myriad of galaxies. So it's kind of like you have to think big when you think about space, as opposed to just being, talking a whole show about the moon, right? But as exciting as the moon is, and exciting as Mars is, space is vast. It's vast. It's big. It's really old. It's moving fast. There's a lot going on. It's mostly unexplored. For what I know, it's mostly unexplored. We've barely explored Earth. It's very interesting that as humans, we've explored so much about physics, and we know so much about physics, and yet, we've actually explored very little of the actual properties of the universe. But we do know a lot about physics. But at the same time, that's really good, because that gives us a really, really good foundation for our exploration into the cosmos, and that'll only improve. Well, it is only improving thanks to the new quantum computers, faster computers, better calculations. So we're going to know more and more and more about the fundamentals of space and how that works, and that's really going to assist us massively as we move out, because we can use those tools of the foundational tools of physics and math, and then all we have to figure out then, like a jigsaw puzzle, is how to put them together, how to piece the components together in order to survive scenarios. Which pieces go where, and how do we, this sort of creative thinking is the next step, as opposed to going, wow, we're here now. What's the physics of this? We kind of already know that. Are you excited by that, Craig?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, what you're saying about we don't even know much about our own Earth, but we know a lot about physics. I think a lot of that comes down to just funding, and just there's not the resources there to actually experiment with the stuff while we're learning about it. A lot of that just comes down to where do governments want to move their money. But yeah, I think you bring up a good point about if we were to actually get to a place like Mars or the Kuiper Belt, or a little bit before that, like on Jupiter or Saturn. Once we get there, it'd be hey, what do we do next? Because we already kind of know what the dimensions of the planets are like and how the physics are. So I think it's interesting to think about what or how people would actually respond when they actually get there, and what would be the next incentive, because really everyone keeps talking about once we get there, that's really the goal. But then after that, it's like, what's next? Do we stay for many, many years? Do we go back, or something in between? So,
Craig, do you see Earth eventually becoming choked heart of a sort of solar system republic or something like that, like a glistening jewel of a political system? Or do you see eventually
Federation?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Or do you see that eventually there will be a civil war between, say, Earth and Mars or these other colonies, because Earth is a tyrannical force that doesn't understand these other planets' needs in the galaxy? What do you see for galactic solar system politics in the future? Even in the short future, I mean, if there's a small colony on Mars and they have demands, and Earth plays politics and they don't deliver on the demands, I mean, that's going to make people angry. I mean, when they're vulnerable, I mean, that doesn't matter so much. But look what happened in America when they got angry at the British. I mean, they rose up and they became a superpower.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think, honestly, we haven't talked about it yet, but I think if Mars is the next target where people actually can live on there and like they can be born and die there, I think the next target after that would be Titan, another moon in the solar system that people keep talking about a lot, is where people can actually live on there. But I really think if you could establish a base on both those places, and people are actually born and die there, and they go many generations without even going back to Earth, then yeah, I think there could be very much just like hey, we live here, you guys live there, Mars is here, and everyone's kind of just settled. But I think honestly, like Earth would become not like a dumpster, but like I could see other planets being a lot more utopian, just because humans are just a lot more intelligent now with how they reuse things, and they just know how to be a lot more efficient in general. So I think any new planet would become just like you could kind of see it as like a utopian sci-fi thing, just because they wouldn't go there and just start wreaking havoc on the planet just because they're not going to make the same mistakes they did with Earth over the last 500 years or so. So I think
we hope not.
We hope not, yeah. But I think so. Once they actually branch off and they would actually settle on a planet, it would only be upwards from there. And then whatever happens to Earth happens. But I don't really see it as like hey, let's just keep going back and forth between all these planets, because people could be pretty satisfied just living in one place and just kind of having their whole family live there. But I mean, I could be totally wrong. So,
what do you think? Mr. Kerecz?
I agree with that. I think you're going to have both. I think you're going to have the people that are going to want to colonize and stake a claim and gain land for their family and their generations. And I think you're going to have the other people that are still going to want to keep expanding. And something I wanted to think, I thought about while you were talking about, the technology. I think, when they first made the Model T was out and stuff, there was, people would never be able to go past 35 miles an hour without them dying or something. And my point to that is, I think as we reach out, our technology is going to get better. There's going to be things we realize and think of to travel faster and better that we're just not even thinking of right now. I mean, it could even be something bizarre that's technology we know of today that we're just not using in the proper way. We just don't know. So I think something will come up that'll enable us to expand, and I think human beings want to explore. I'm surprised that we haven't explored the past number of years. I mean, that surprised me. I think people have gotten consumed with their instantaneous gratification, and now that's kind of wearing off, where now they're starting to get the awe and the itch again to explore. Maybe it is a cycle. Maybe we'd see the same kind of a cycle with colonizing Mars and Titan, where they're there for a while, and then a number of years down the road, we go through a cycle where those people do want to explore again. So maybe maybe we're seeing a cycle to human beings we didn't realize. Coming to the New World, and then wanting to colonize from the East Coast of the New World to the West Coast of the New World, and now going that maybe it seems to go through cycles. So maybe they'll be happy to be on Mars and Titan, and then maybe after a number of years they'll get the itch again. Maybe it's sort of like the 7-year itch, but maybe it's more like the 100-year itch or something, to explore new worlds again. I think man will want to reach out eventually, but I think you're going to have the people that are going to be happy to set down their roots You know, just like there's people in this country that have been happy to set down the roots, but some of those people that did that were explorers way back in the day of the Old West. They boldly went to the Old West where nobody lived and put their roots out, and so they basically were explorers back then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, did you want to say something, Craig?
No. I think back to whenever we think of like the 1400s, like the 1700s. Obviously, people were always going to want to explore, but like people knew the chances of not making it were very, very high. So that kind of that's probably a good reason why it took many, many centuries to actually call it, or at least have America formed, is because trying to actually have that many people take the risk was just not going to happen in a short amount of time. So I like your point about certain people will want to stay, then eventually they're going to have that 100-year itch where they want to actually go for maybe another solar system or something else in the within our own solar system. It's just a matter of who wants to take the risk. Just kind of like when the British came to the U.S., it's like a small fraction went, and not all of them made it, and then the rest just kind of stayed back. So.
Yeah, totally agree, and it's you can see history in cycles. It's pretty easy to see cycles of history, and it feels like we've filled up Earth, and we've got to go. It's got to happen. We've got to make a stake a claim somewhere else, and that sounds like it could repeat for a while. You filled up one asteroid, I'll just go to the next one. So, but yeah, we are going to take all our cool technology out there, and I like this idea that we'll make these other planets, quote unquote, better. Hopefully, filled with life. Expanding life all out throughout the solar system. That would be really good. So, speaking of life, my next question, I guess, was: do you think, Craig, that NASA or that the government or that any entity knows that there's life on Mars, or potentially has evidence of it, and we're going to see a release of that evidence in the coming months or years? And or if not, do you think that, because we go out into the world and archaeologists are always discovering new civilizations and new things out there. Woolly mammoths are being melted. They're coming out from these disappearing ice ice glaciers and stuff, and we're discovering new dinosaur bones which are older than we thought and younger than we thought. I mean, we're discovering new things here on Earth all the time. Do you think these xenobiologists or archaeologists or whoever go out into the world, into the solar system, do you think we're going to uncover either life, bacteria, civilizations? Do you think there's a lot to discover out there in terms of civilizations?
I don't think. I think the idea of life in general, just because we don't even know how life got started on Earth, I think the idea of finding multi-cell organisms or some sort of bacteria on Mars could be very, very doable. It's just a matter of when we have the technology to actually get people up there and actually search for that kind of stuff. But I think once people actually find that, or if they actually can prove they can find it, I would hope they would release it in the next, call it year or so, instead of leaving everyone in the dark. And then you were asking a question about intelligent life.
Well, yeah, either now or extinct. Are we going to find a structure or an ancient city, or is any of that likely at all? It's a very old universe.
I think Earth is pretty special as far as when you think about there was 6 mass extinctions where 95% of the species were wiped out all at one time. I just don't think that happens very often, even in our galaxy. So I don't think we would find something like something like dinosaurs or fish or anything on Mars. I think it'd be a lot more just hopefully we can find some multi-cell evidence or just some bacteria or something, just because it's not too cold up there. So you could definitely find something like a tardigrade where it can live in very harsh environments, but it could also be something very different from what we have on Earth. So I don't think there would be something like intelligent life or anything on Mars or Venus or anything like that. It'd be a lot more of just hopefully we can find something where there was evidence, but it wouldn't be too evolved at all.
All right. What about you, Mr. Davis?
I would hope. I think the same as Dave does. Although I think it would be very cool to find some sort of alien architecture or archaeology. I think being an alien, being a space archaeologist would be like the best job in the world if you could travel at next to light speed to galaxy to galaxy and find abandoned structures from ancient civilizations. I think that would be like the ideal job.
Yeah.
But whether we're actually going to find that, I don't know. Maybe sometime eventually when we can travel further past our solar system. My fear and my hope all at the same time could be that if we found a structure, it might not be from somebody that was from Mars, but someone else that traveled space. And that also could be a plus and could be a minus depending on how we get along. But we'll have to see if that happens. That would be interesting, though.
So, it would be very interesting. If we do, David, if we did hypothetically, you wake up tomorrow, and the headlines all over the world say, Mars life confirmed, bacteria found on Mars with rover, analyzed it in some sort of lab somewhere, alien life exists. Is the world ready for that, spiritually, scientifically, socially, politically? Would the world go into a sort of shock, or would the world be like, all right, we can deal with this?
I think there would be a couple of different schools of thought. I mean, obviously, anyone like in the science community would be like, oh, this is fantastic. This is, oh my God, this is amazing. I think there would be a lot of kind of like with things like the moon landing, the Holocaust, the 9/11 conspiracies. There'd probably be whenever you hear like maybe 20% of people just don't believe about the moon landing or the Holocaust. I think probably it'd be 50% when it comes to finding life on Mars. Of just the population in general, we don't believe that. And then over time, that number would dwindle. But I don't think it would cause like a panic or anything. I think it would just be like okay, this is what they found. Some people accept it, other people will take a couple of years, but I don't think there'd be any sort of bad thing about it. I think it would just be like there'd be a lot of doubters, way more than like the moon landing or anything. But and then over time, people would just have to accept it. So.
Would the sales of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds skyrocket?
No, I don't think so.
Actually, I think my belief would be that it would just be like the last month when they released the video of the UFOs that the government released and said there were UFOs. I think there'd be a lot of people that just wouldn't even pay attention to it or seem to care, which is surprising to me. But people are so busy with their other gossip news and TMZ or whatever. Is that what it is, TMZ? That I think they don't seem to care about UFOs, and I think they'd be the same way with life being found at Mars.
Yeah, but if there was like announcements from like 10 of the largest world leaders, I think it'd be very, very different. But I know what you mean by like the UFOs, or hey, every 5 years you find something crazy that could be intelligent life. But I think if there was actually like a bacteria found in the next 5 years, and there was multiple world leaders coming together and say, hey, we got to tell everyone about this, I think people would listen, and it would just be like a matter of say who's on board versus who thinks this is a hoax, and then it would kind of go from there.
So my next question is, basically, if people are interested in space and planets and the Planetary Society and what you guys do, where can they find you? What can they do to get involved? What can they do in their local communities? What's the general good rule? I mean, just watch documentaries, get involved, get active. Should they take up a new university degree? Obviously watch That Nation. I mean, that's great. But what should people do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and we get that a lot. We're on planetary.org. We have a very expansive website, and Explore Mars has one as well. I know Explore Mars is more of like they hold conferences and everything, which is great. Planetary Society is more where they have local chapters. We have probably about maybe 20 in the U.S. and maybe 20 or 30 overseas, like internationally, where if you do live in like a major area, you can actually see that there are events just in your backyard, just other like-minded people who love space and love to talk about it. Who actually come together every maybe a few times a year, maybe every month or so, and you can kind of just kind of build your network from there. I don't really think there's a need to get like a master's degree or a PhD just to become like a hey, I like space and everything. I think it's a lot of it just comes down to people talking about it and talking about what they really like, and then trying to find other like-minded people who share the same passions, whether it's through like Planetary Society, Exploring Mars, or the Mars Society, which is actually having a conference next week in Los Angeles, I think. So things like that, and there's probably 10 other ones in the U.S. where if you're actually passionate to get out of bed about it and go talk with other people, then definitely do it. But there's really no need to pour thousands of dollars in it to get a master's degree. You don't have to be a qualified investor to invest in like a hedge fund for a private company. It's not like that at all. It's just like if you have a passion for it, you can definitely find other people in your community who have very similar interests as well.
Yeah, and it's a burgeoning subject. Sorry, Mr. Kerecz.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Dave a question. Now, I'm coming out to speak on the 7th of December. Now, my question to you though is, what's been the most interesting or amazing speaker you've had that's given you guys the most interesting information that might be interested for everybody to hear here?
Yeah, so a couple. We had Dr. Edward Guinan, who's a professor at Villanova University. He came and spoke 2 years ago on interstellar he talked about exoplanets essentially and how there's maybe 5,000 of them discovered, and there's obviously being more discovered every day. He talked about that. We also went to his university as well, Villanova, last year. We had about 40 or 50 people, and he's actually a professor in biology, and they were actually growing a Martian greenhouse, believe it or not, in the backyard of Villanova, and his students were actually being graded on how they could grow certain foods and crops in like a Martian soil. This is about a year ago. It was a really cool experience. So we got him. We also have a NASA ambassador, John Conrad, who used to be a Lockheed engineer for his whole career. Now he's retired. And his whole job, he comes around, he does talks about like 50-year anniversary of the moon. He talks about the Cassini missions. He talks about climate change and kind of everything in between. And a lot of it just kind of, it starts the discussion between just local members who have different opinions on this stuff. So and we've probably had about 6 or 7 people, professors at Penn and Drexel, come and talk about astrophysics and a number of other topics.
Very cool. And how about you, Mr. Kerecz? What if people get excited? What do you say they should do? I think if people are excited about space and Mars, I'd say look into the Mars Society, Explore Mars, look into the Planetary Society, the National Space Society. I mean, and there's all kinds of things you can do and get involved in. You like Dave said, you don't have to have your master's or bachelor's or master's in anything necessarily directly related. Even Dave having his in finance, I think there's going to be need for finance with the space program. There is need now for that. I mean, but showing your interest and support, the more people that get out there and support, I think the more it's going to help make it a possibility and make it actually happen. You have to show the support. Yeah, totally agreed. And my little contribution is to support the U.S. Transhumanist-Party to try and figure out good ethical ways to use this technology to support these ventures. I think if I hang around the technology side, so that we can guide this technology to being safe and useful, and to keep society in a secular secular mode of thinking when it comes to space exploration, space colonization. I think that's the contribution that I can do here at Detonation, and I thank you very much, David Craig, for participating in that that experience. You've been a wonderful guest. You've been really, it's really cool to think about this stuff. This is one of my favorite topics. I'll say one of, but it is really high up on the list. I don't know anymore what my favorite is. I've always loved learning in general. But yeah, space colonization is just such a big thing. And I was actually writing a book on holiday one time about so I'll tell you the plot because I'm not writing it anymore, but it was kind of cool. So basically there was this big fat engineer, and he was worked for this big mega company, but the mega company is actually pretty small on the tier of mega companies. Anyway, and he was mining one of these. He was just sitting around, and he was sending drones out to mine these asteroids, and he bought one in. And he tried to drill into it, and the drill broke, and he was like, why is the drill breaking? So anyway, he calls up his manager and he says, "Oi, I can't get into this asteroid. What's going on?" Long story short, the asteroid is a secretly disguised alien ship that's been sitting out there monitoring, doing monitoring stuff forever, and nobody really saw it because it has an outer coat of asteroid, and then inner coat of alien ship that has strange metal components or whatever. Anyway, and it turns out to be a humanoid one. So then the United Nations Federation of Earth gets involved, and there becomes this big tug of war between these corporates who really want to use this technology to accelerate their profits, and the United Nations Federation of Earth sort of idea that wants the technology to explore the technology, break it down, use it for societal gain, weapon systems, all these other things. And there's this big tug of war between the two, and the technology leads to coordination, because they can use it, then they can actually start to access the systems of all these alien creatures and start to discover how vast the alien network is across the solar system, and it freaks the whole solar system out because the people are everywhere, from Pluto to Neptune to they're everywhere, and it starts to freak them all out. And in some cases, Earth and Mars start to split up, which they haven't done in hundreds of years. They start to have a tug of war, and and other planetary bodies become supercell, and it just starts off this chaotic scene. That's what I was writing, and I just love, because I love this topic so much, and I think about it all the time. And anyway, but thanks for listening to my little rant there. But I will get it done one day. I'll hopefully. I think this whole topic is really, really fun, and I think that's part of the thing. If you can have fun with this topic, you can do a lot. You can do a lot for your mental stimulus. There's a lot of science. There's a lot of community that you could build up. If you're an entrepreneur or a financier, or if you're in business, there's a lot of money to be made. I'm trying to get the guys from Firefly who just won a massive contract. I've been talking to those guys for months now, and they've been really busy. They haven't been able to come on the show, but now they've won a huge contract. They might be able to come on the show now and talk to us about it. Firefly has been a really good one. And so well done for winning that contract, Firefly. You've done a great job, and and it's these little space companies that I'm really excited about, these little ones, because these are the ones that could really, they have the energy there to really burst out onto the scene and make space great again. So it's great, and it's an old story too. If you're a historian, I mean, this has been going on for 50, 60, 80 years, 100 years, and we've been thinking about this for a long time. So there's just so much packed into space, and space colonization, space tourism, space mining, space asteroids, physics, politics. I mean, it's all there. So thank you so much for coming on and having fun and playing with this. And we'd love to see you here again to update us on all the Planetary Society stuff that's going on. We always love to hear from you. And we'll always love to hear from Mr. Kerecz as well, who thank you very much for all your participation.
Thank you, Steele.
we will see you definitely again in a few days, actually, to talk
Yes.
more about these subjects. Because we can't get enough. But thank you very much, David Craig. You've been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. It was a good time.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Steele.
All right, so that's Detonation. All more coming to all this week. Detonation, putting death out of business. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.